Hi, everyone. Welcome to another follow-up webinar for Beyond School Hours. Go ahead and tell us where you're from. We're going to get started here in about 2 minutes. You can go ahead and put your name and where you're from in the chat. If you're just joining us, we're going to get started in about 1 minute. If you put your name and where you're from, so we can see where everybody is coming to us from today. I'm in Philadelphia. It's kind of overcast here, but it is very nice. It's about 70 degrees, so that's good. All right, we're going to get started. I want to thank everyone for joining us again this afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Seary. I'm the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning at Foundations, Inc. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to join us for another of our Beyond School Hours National Education Conference follow-up webinars. Before I get started, I'd like to give you a little background about Foundations, Inc. Foundations is a national education nonprofit. We are located in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Is to improve the quality of education for students across the school day. So we work by building the skills of educators in school and out of school time. And if you are interested in learning a little bit more about our organization, you can follow us on media or check out our website. Paula will put that information in the chat for us. You probably know us already, our signature professional learning experience, which is School Hours Conference. Our conference is held every year in February, and we are so excited that in 2022, we're going to be back in Orlando. So keep a lookout for registration opening, and we hope to see you then. I'd now like to welcome Caryn Cavanagh, Shelley Riedel, and Dr. Lisa McCulley. They're going to give us an overview of the Texas Education Agency's process to assure high quality programming for the 600 plus after programs that are funded by 21st Century Learning. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. We're really happy to be here today. We had originally planned to do this presentation in February. However, we had some really unusual weather in Texas and didn't have power or water for a week. But in any event, we're really happy to be here today and to introduce our quality assurance process team for Texas ACE. I'm Caryn Cavanagh. I'm the Director of Professional Learning and Curriculum for Resources for Learning. We are a contractor engaging in this process with the Texas Education Agency.
Hi, I'm Lisa McCulley, Director of Research Evaluation and Assessment at Resources for Learning. I'm so happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Shelley Riedel, also at Resources for Learning. I'm a curriculum and assessment specialist. And we recognize that we've got this hour to spend with you today. We want to make the most of it. So we're going to launch right in and hopefully get to know a little bit about you through an introductory chat. And so what we'd like to do, we know we're all here because we care deeply about out-of-school time programs and how we can ensure that they are high quality and really serving our students to the best of their ability. And so in the chat, we'd like to ask, The chat directions are on the left side of your screen. If your last name begins with A through D, please do not type anything. Everyone else, please chat and answer to the question you see on the right. The question being, what are the key attributes of high quality out of school time programs? And the A through D last name group, please just watch the chat as responses roll in and be ready to share out anything that catches your attention, anything that you'd like just to bring to the group. So if you would go ahead and begin that now. So everyone whose last name is E on, please go ahead and type in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute and call out as well, we're kind of a small group today. What do you think those key attributes of high quality out of school time programs are? So I'm seeing high quality educators, youth leadership, program design, quality staff, students, put our kids first, student engagement, any other ideas? All right. Can I get a volunteer, someone who is in the last name A through D group, who has been watching the chat, to simply unmute and share anything that you saw dropped in the chat that you find meaningful or that resonates, or anything that you'd like to expand on?
This is Margot DeLon. Student engagement is what I noticed.
Student engagement. Anything else?
Hi, Shelley. This is Lori Shelley. Hello, RFL.
Hello.
Yes, evidence of youth leadership, that really struck out to me. It's anybody who's familiar with YPQ knows that that is at the top of their pyramid as far as quality programming.
Anything else from last names A through D? Anything else that you noticed that you'd like to share? Anything that struck you? How about from the entire group? Is there anything that you thought really was a highlight that you were glad to see show up in the chat, or something that you thought was really important when you saw it come through?
I would say parent buy-in, and I was thinking it and then I saw it there. I would definitely say, because parents know if it's quality or not, especially if they have returning students to our programs. So that stood out to me.
Wonderful. Well, it's so interesting to see everything that I saw come through in the chat. I know as you're all sharing as well, we know these are critical aspects to high quality programs, and we all have that sense. It's that human nature. We know what a really good quality program is. We want to kind of launch into a look at how we developed a process to really monitor and assure that high quality programming is taking place in Texas ACE. And before we kind of get into the details of Texas ACE, we wanted to look at how research really supports all of these attributes that you have discussed in the chat. So I'm going to transition to Lisa as she introduces some of the research base for the work that we do.
Thank you, Shelley. So there is a ton of research on what characterizes high quality out of school programs, but I heard a lot of things, and the National Research Council has done a synthesis of program features that support positive youth development. There was a meta-analysis in 2010 that identified features related to program effects. There's others who have conducted individual studies of after school programs to see how certain features contribute to school success. So taken together, this is just a sampling of a lot of research that's out there, but taken together, several attributes sort of bubble to the surface that we heard. High quality after school programs are characterized, according to research, first and foremost by relationships. And I heard children number one, relationships. And this involves positive, supportive, safe I saw safety in the chat, relationships, and this could be adult to child, teacher to student, it could be among students, and as well as bringing in parents and having that relationship with the community and parents as well. So over and over, the research shows that relationships are a key part of high quality after school programs. Activities that are age appropriate, diverse. I saw engaging, student engagement. So having hands-on, I saw that in the chat. So yes, activities that are engaging to students are, they do characterize high quality programs. Instruction, I saw high quality staff in the chat. Best practices in instruction, regardless of content, is what the research has found. So it's not just being a good math teacher, it's being a good instructor, regardless of your content area. Having focused, clear objectives and having some intentionality in what you're teaching, and then also active learning, which also goes back to that engagement piece. And finally, research suggests that continuous improvement is a characteristic of high quality programs. So using data to drive program decision-making, revisiting what you're doing on a regular basis, and then also promoting ongoing learning among all of the staff. So that staff are learning right there with students as well. So I will let Caryn take it from here to talk more specifically about the program that we're going to talk about today.
I'm sure that many of you know what 21st CCLC is, but we just wanted to put this slide in here, and I'll go through it very quickly just to give you a sense of how this program has kind of grown exponentially since it began in 1995. It was part of a competitive grant program through the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and started with $750,000 in federal funding. As you can see, the estimated federal allocation in 2020 was $1.2 billion. In Texas, being a very large state, we receive approximately $115 million to fund many, many programs. And prior to the ESSER funding that's coming through, this is really the only federal funding source that Texas has had for after-school programs. And so we value it tremendously. And again, it gives us the ability to provide services to students and families across the state. And now knowing what the emphasis of these programs are, and knowing how important it is now to accelerate student learning, to address COVID slide, to focus on SEL, which is what our programs are very much about. We place a lot of value in this program and the funding. And the overarching goals is to help students do well in core academic subject areas, but particularly reading and math. We provide a broad array of enrichment activities to complement their academic programs. And also a lot of it is about engaging families, particularly in their children's education, but also giving literacy and related educational development opportunities. That's just a quick overview. So now, what does Texas ACE look like? And when I say Texas ACE, you're probably saying, how did I jump from Texas 21st century to Texas ACE? Well, Texas ACE is the rebranding of 21st CCLC in the state of Texas. And again, just to give you an idea of our scope, we have 83 grantees across the state. We have 602 centers. We currently have 2 active cycles, Cycle 9 and Cycle 10, and we're in the midst of the Cycle 11 application process. So we're about probably over 100,000 students served, and the focus being on schools that are low SES and low performing. So supporting students most in need. And the program involves academic support, enrichment, family engagement, and college and career readiness, as I mentioned earlier. So we are just one tiny part of a team. And we have our great partners on the call today, Lori, Shania, Chandler, Francis, Caryn, our Westat partners. But we just want to show you how we all work together towards the single effort of driving program quality. So there's, the grantee compliance and program implementation. Texas ACE has a blueprint that is sort of the foundation from which we all work. It's based on statutory requirements, research, state requirements, and then there's other compliance components like the needs, using needs assessment data, logic models, action planning, program evaluation. So that feeds into the field implementing what needs to be done to provide services to students and families. Our quality assurance process is a bit of a monitoring process where we look at the extent to which programs, grantees, and centers are implementing what we consider to be high quality program elements. And then they go through a process where they submit evidence and document processes, which we in turn evaluate, score. We have a team of monitors and do data analysis to feed into our partners, Westat, and they do the technical assistance. They do a lot of the heavy lifting and providing support to centers, making sure that they're meeting compliance expectations like number of students served, number of staff per student, enrollment. They do a lot of site visits, and then most importantly, they provide a lot of professional learning opportunities. So we all work together. We have a great collaborative relationship, and again, this is how we primarily drive quality. So we'll go into a lot of detail about the quality assurance process today, or a high level detail about the quality assurance process today, but this is a very broad overview of what the quality assurance process involves. So we have an online portfolio. We have resources that we provide to the field to help them understand what we're measuring, what the expectations are for high quality program implementation. We have a scoring tool that we use, and we provide results and feedback, not only to the field, but again, to our partners, Westat and TEA, to kind of figure out what the state of the state is. This is a very, this is just a, oh, there we go. This is just a snapshot of what the quality assurance process implementation has looked like so far. We're in year 2 of our involvement with the Texas ACE program. And, the directive from TEA was to really create a monitoring process that focused on program quality in conjunction with compliance. So when we set about in year 1, we kind of look at year 1 as our pilot year. We looked at the research and the literature to develop a monitoring process where we developed 17 quality indicators to kind of operationalize what high quality programming looks like. We did a pilot, and we engaged stakeholders in a pretty comprehensive feedback process. And then we formally monitored a targeted sample of 156 centers. And in that process, we were able to analyze about 2,500 data points. And we'll go over what those data points look like and the components. So in year 2, we kind of really did revamp the process based on what we learned in year 1. 17 quality indicators went up to 47 quality indicators, which unfortunately COVID and some of the extreme weather that we've had in Texas, we kind of had to cut back significantly to 23 quality indicators this year. Our plan is to go back to our 47 in year 3, or at least as close to it as possible. And pretty much the process was the same. We did another feedback process. We got data governance board approval. And then our targeted group, it went up to 239 centers. And we introduced a 3rd data collection window. So in year 1, we only looked at data in the fall and the spring. In year 2, we looked at it 3 times a year. And we increased the number of data points that we looked at to over 3,500, even though we had to cut back some quality indicators.
One thing that I'd like to add is that over this 3-year cycle, the sample that Caryn's describing as we moved from, I believe it was 156 to 239, is such that all centers will be actively monitored over the course of the 3-year cycle.
Yes, thank you. So we just wanted to include this slide as a way to provide buckets of what we'll cover for the remainder of the presentation. So we wanted to share with you what drives the quality assurance process. What do we measure? What are the high quality program elements that we're looking at and expecting to be implemented with fidelity? How do we support programs throughout this QAP process? How do we gather these data? And perhaps the most important question of all, how does the quality assurance process drive continuous improvement? Okay. I'm going to turn it over now to Shelley, who will explain how the development process started.
So the driver for the QAP is the Texas ACE blueprint that Caryn already described to a degree. So the Texas Education Agency developed this guidance document that really defines program quality. And it's a large document that has a lot of detail, and it combines all of the statutory and grant requirements with also the research-based best practices. There was a lot of look at the literature and the research on out-of-school time programming, relationship building, instructional practices, best practices in academic support, all of these things, as well as the TEA's overarching goals to create this guidance document on program quality. And what I'm showing you here is a visual depiction of the cornerstone of this definition of quality that includes 4 quality components: school and community engagement, vision, mission, goals, continuous quality improvement, and operations. And with each of those quality components, there are subcomponents. And this cornerstone, this definition of quality in the Texas ACE blueprint, is really the launching point for the QAP, the quality assurance process. And so I'm going to show you a little bit and kind of unpack these pieces so you can see how they build on one another. And I know the text on this slide is small. We don't expect you to read this text. This is just showing you a high-level view of the blueprint on the right side of your screen. This is an appendix that shows each of those subcomponents that I was showing on the previous slide and the quality criteria associated with them. There are these statements defining a quality criteria. And those quality criteria within each subcomponent feed into the quality of the QAP. And they feed in as statements on a series of continuum. And so I would like to show you one example of a continuum. We actually, as Caryn said, we have 47, but I want to show you one example so you can get a good look at how this actually plays out for programs. So moving from the driver, the Texas ACE blueprint that defines these quality criteria, we can then go into how we measure whether or not this is being implemented. So how do we measure high quality program implementation? We do this through our 47 continuum. They're developed for each of those criteria or those quality elements, and they really define the expectations or the criteria for implementing these things. And here is one example of a continuum. Now, all of the 47 continuum, they look the same. They have the same formatting. They're on a scale from 0 to 4. Each step defines criteria that programs need to show evidence of to earn any specific score along the continuum. If you take a minute just to kind of look at it, 0 to 1 is the only place where you'll see a statement of you do not do this thing versus you do this thing. And the compliant at step 1 is not compliant in terms of statutes. It's simply compliant in terms of you've provided the upload that we need. You are compliant. Now we can begin to look at quality around that item. So in this example, for it to be compliant, a center has to provide criteria for serving students most in need of Texas ACE services. Once we have that criteria, we can begin to look at the processes involved, and that moves from implementing to progressing to optimizing. TEA's current expectations for programs is that they will be at 2 implementing. And so that's why 2 through 4 are shaded green. These are all considered acceptable, optimizing being ideal, but 2 is the current expectation for programming. When you look at 3 and 4, progressing and optimizing, we have built in a structure that sets programs up to see step by step how to move towards optimizing. And so in 3, here 3 is that the center is providing evidence that they serve the students most in need. And in 4, there will always be a continuous improvement process. We want to see that centers or programs are using data to inform their process, to continually improve, to be the best program that they can be. So there will always be some continuous improvement requirements involved to be an optimizing program along a continuum. So one other thing to note, and I believe Lisa will talk a little bit more about this later, is that there's really an embedded formative value in these continuum. The levels of implementation are clearly defined in stages and step by step. And so programs are asked to self-assess, and they can also use these continuum to kind of guide their progress. If they know that they're currently implementing, they can see the steps that they need to take to move into progressing or optimizing. Back out a little from the continuum, I would like to show you that this is the same continuum we were just looking at. That implementing statement that you're seeing under 2. So, sorry, it looked like I accidentally got muted. Were you guys able to hear me? Are we good?
Shelley, you want to rewind maybe a sentence or so?
Okay, sorry guys. So I'm showing you the continuum that we were looking at previously, and 2, which is implementing our implementing statement. What I'd like you to notice is that the top left of the screen shows the Texas ACE blueprint. And those quality criteria detailed in the Texas ACE blueprint for each subcomponent, those statements are the implementing statements, and all 47 are our continuum. So the continuum is launched by the quality criteria established in the blueprint, and it becomes the implementing statement for each continuum. So next, taking a look at how do we support programs to engage in this QAP, to utilize these continuums to inform their practice, and how do they show us evidence that they are engaging in these things? We have a number of supports. We use guidebooks and workbooks. We also have webinars and a help desk. And so let me show you a little bit about each of those items. Going back to this overview that Caryn showed earlier, you'll see in the top left, there's an online portfolio. We actually utilize Qualtrics and have programs enter their submissions in a survey style format, and they give their uploads and explains in that. What I'm going to show you now are the guidebooks, which is top right, and just below them the workbooks, and how we utilize those things to support programs in this process. So the Quality Assurance Guidebook has a lot of information. It's kind of like the go-to to engage for program centers to engage in the QAP. It provides a timeline and overview of submissions. It has guidance documents that explain the structure of the QAP and the continuum, guidance on things like the logic model, available resources and supports, and it's perfectly aligned with the online portfolio. So the content, the text, the structure, what they see in the guidance document is exactly what they will see with the online portfolio. So just taking a quick look, this is an example guidance document. We have some call out boxes here to show to show all of the pieces of this guidance document. So it will identify, you'll see kind of top center, it identifies the person responsible for the submission. Across the QAP and all of these continuums, some of them are most appropriate at the program level by the project director, or they're really a grantee, we would call it a grantee level submission. Where others, and many, we actually drill down to the center level. We all know that the centers who are running these programs, they are unique. They have unique populations and families and needs. And so we want to drill down and really see what's happening at that center level. And so those would be center level submissions. And like in this example, it would be a site coordinator who's responsible for that. We have the title, we have a driving question that helps kind of give context to the submission. We show the continuum, and then for each step along the continuum, you can see the color coding where one is compliant. On the right side of the page, you see a compliance where we are going to ask them to upload something. We often have uploads, explains. We have processes to get this evidence to demonstrate whether or not they should earn credit for that stage along the continuum. So within our guidebook, I'm just showing you an example. This is what it actually looks like. So for each QI, each quality indicator, we have this type of support material to show them what portfolio prompt they will get in the online portfolio, where we will ask the direct question that the continuum is asking for evidence of. And then we also provide any key information they might need in terms of example evidence they might provide, or what their explain might include in terms of providing enough information so we can determine a score. The workbooks are identical to the guidebooks, except they're in an editable format. And so what we suggest to all of our programs is that they utilize the workbooks and the guidebooks to create responses, to gather all of their evidence, all of their artifacts to prepare to submit before they actually submit in the online portfolio via Qualtrics. And that way they have record and they're completely prepared once the submission window opens up. This is just showing you a couple of examples. We provide webinars for each quality indicator to give some additional guidance and suggestions, helpful hints, to kind of walk programs through preparing to submit for that quality indicator. So we'll walk through the continuum and walk through examples that we've heard from the field or questions that we have from the field, just as an additional support. And then finally, we also mentioned that we have a help desk, and I don't have a slide here for that, but we're also kind of on call any day, anytime to respond individually to questions as they arise. So that's kind of a look at how we measure and our system for measuring. And Caryn's going to switch in and transition to describe how we gather data for these things specifically.
Thanks, Shelley. So we wanted to go into detail about how we gather these data. So what does our selection process look like? What does the data submission process look like? And what does the scoring process look like? So as we mentioned, we have to, due to the fact that we're in a very large state and working within the means that we have to do a targeted review. And we do that, we select those centers, and in year 2, it was 239 centers using a randomized stratified selection process. So we wanted to make sure that we were looking at centers from cycle 9, centers from cycle 10, centers from all different types. So we have some grantee types that are school districts. We have some that are colleges or universities. We have some that are private organizations like community and schools or Boys and Girls Club. So we really wanted to look at what's working and under what conditions. We do have certain quality indicators that are grantee level, and those we look at across all 83 centers. So every program is getting a look at, we're looking to see what they're implementing. However, some really receive a targeted review. So we have 239 centers that receive the targeted review and 83 that get the overall look. We also have grantees. Some have 10 centers, some have 2 centers, some have 5 centers. So our selection process, we wanted to make sure we had a representative sample. So if a grantee had 10 centers, we looked at anywhere between 4 or 5 of those centers. If a grantee had 5 centers, we maybe only looked at 1 or 2 centers. And as Shelley mentioned earlier, our plan is set out in such a way that every center is looked at over the course of 3 years. Okay. So this gives you a sense of what our submission window looks like. And as I mentioned, there are some center level quality indicators. Those are submitted by the site coordinator for each center. We have the project director, and that's the grantee level Those are the grantee level submissions. And then we also have quality indicators that are completed by the family engagement specialist, which in the state of Texas, that is a grantee level position. So there's one family engagement specialist per grantee who may support up to 10 centers. And we really developed this window with a great deal of intentionality. We really thought very hard about when was the right time to collect data. Did we give them enough time to implement in order to get a really good look at what was happening? Considering what data is available at what point in the year. In the spring, we really wanted to look at what we call more evidence of impact quality indicators, and that really had a lot to do with data. So academic gains, our centers or grantees actually serving the targeted number of students, things that are kind of, they can provide numeric data in order for us to place them on the continuum. So, we have the 3 windows, and then we also let them know when they will get their score reports. And all of this, toward the effort of continuous quality improvement kind of culminates in an action plan that all grantees and centers have to complete for the subsequent year. Okay. So moving back into the process, we have an online portfolio, which is where centers or project directors provide their evidence. And as Shelley mentioned, we use Qualtrics. So that gives them the opportunity to upload documents, JPEGs, videos, Word files, Excel files, any evidence that they need to submit to demonstrate that what they're doing. We're not prescriptive at all. We know that every program does things differently. So if they can provide adequate evidence to show that they're implementing the high quality program elements, or meeting the minimum measure of compliance, then that's what we're looking for, and Qualtrics gives us the ability to do that. So Shelley, if you could advance to the next slide, please. We think that we really created a very transparent system. All program staff have the guidebook in advance of the submission process, and it's word for word verbatim. So there are no gotchas. They know exactly what we're asking for. We provide suggested evidence. That's just suggested, but there are no surprises. And Lisa will talk about the value of that. We really set out to have embedded formative feedback, so it was clear what the expectations were, and it gives centers a chance to really look at where they are and where they need to go. But this is just a sample of what the online portfolio looks like.
So now we're going to shift gears and look a little bit at the scoring tool, and then results and feedback, and how we present those, how we provide those, and what people are able to do with those. Excuse me. So what you're seeing right now is actually sort of a vertical version of the continuum that Shelley walked you through a few minutes ago. You can see where the implementing, progressing, and optimizing, as well as the compliant versus non-compliant, are represented on this. And we have names for this. We call it the cascading tool. But essentially this is to show you sort of how does it progress. And then this is how our monitors actually use the tools. So as they're going through a submission, they consider the evidence that's provided, the explanations that are provided at each of the levels, and then decide whether or not the submission could continue along this progression. In terms of monitors, just a word about that, because we did have up to 9 monitors at one point. And we went to great lengths to train them and ensure that they would be able to score reliably across these submissions. We provided several hours of training. We did a sort of I do, we do, you do model where we scored with monitors. They went through a practice process. And then once they were able to reach sort of the required level of reliability, then they were free to score independently. However, we also continue to provide ongoing support so that there wouldn't be scoring drift across the monitors. So we each sort of adopted a monitor and kept in close contact with them. They were able to reach out to us. We had shared Google Docs where we answered questions on an ongoing basis. So it was a very iterative, collaborative process between us and our monitors. We also asked that they take notes so that we would understand exactly what their thinking was. So if somebody assigned a 3 to a center, then they need to explain why they stopped at 3 and did not continue on to 4. We also did sort of an internal quality assurance process. Once the monitors were finished, we went through and rescored a percentage of those to make sure that we could really trust and have confidence in the results. This year, we also streamed the process even further. When we reduced the number of QIs, last year we had a monitor assigned to X number of centers or programs to do all of the QIs. This year, what we did was split up the submissions by QI and let each monitor be a sort of a specialist in that QI. And what this did was sort of reduce the cognitive load. So the monitors didn't have to remember all of the guidance around multiple QIs. They could really focus in and stay reliable and calibrated in a single or only a couple of QIs. So that's sort of what we did with monitoring. So now let's talk about sort of what do we do, like so what? We're going to talk about sort of the formative value of the continuum and also how it translates into technical assistance. As Shelley described earlier, for every QI, we ask the person submitting to assess themselves on the continuum. And what this does is create sort of an introspective dialogue about what implementation needs to look like. And what we hope is that it'll cause them to it'll create conversations around quality as they're submitting. So we feel like there's sort of an embedded training within that around quality. And then you'll see in a few minutes how we let them see how they thought they did compared to how the monitor scored them. Shelley talked about how continuous improvement is facilitated through the optimizing statements. That's that far right statement on the continuum. We were doing that in hopes that as programs progress and become toward that sort of ideal vision of program quality, that they are sort of taking over that improvement process. It's less about what the monitor scores them, because they're already engaging in a sort of continuous improvement process where they're looking at the construct being measured in the QI and looking at data around how to continually improve that process for themselves. We provide project directors information around trends within their own centers to inform their decision making, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit and give you a few thumbnails of those reports. And also, we share data so that PDs can see where they stand compared to other grantees, so that of the 83 grantees, they sort of see where they're situated in terms of quality. We hope that this will also facilitate networking, sharing of best practices, which we can also talk about in a minute. We also pass on data to WESTAT. Caryn introduced them. They're our very much valued partners that provide technical assistance. So we can sort of hand the baton over to WESTAT with some observations and interpretations of the data that we were able to make, and then they can make decisions around professional learning opportunities to help support the continuous improvement of quality in these programs. And then finally, we also inform TEA of statewide trends. This would inform any changes maybe needed to the blueprint that we would want to consider. It forces us to sort of ask every year, are we measuring what's really most important in terms of moving the needle on program quality? Is this the best way to measure it? Are we asking for the best evidence to show it? How can we more efficiently drive program quality? Is there a communication issue? Is there a training issue? Do we need to think about the blueprint? Do we want to think about our instruments? So we also engage in a continuous internal quality improvement process on our own within the ACE team every year. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about results and show you some examples from actual reports and what that looks like. So our goal is to provide actionable data to grantees and centers as well as to WestAd and TEA so that we can have, we have specific reports that we provide to at both the center level and the grantee level. Grantee meaning also the program level. I'll share a few excerpts from both of these levels of reporting so that you can kind of see how we present data to programs and then some ways that we look at the data in the aggregate. So this is an example, and I know you can't read it, it's very small, but it's a center level report. But you can see that we're not just throwing a bunch of graphs out there. We are reminding them what was measured. We review how it was scored and what the criteria was. And then finally, we provide the actual data in several different formats that I'll share with you. So looking a little closer at the graph that was provided on the previous thumbnail I showed you. This is one thing that we provide, and this is the monitor score versus their self-assessment score. So remember when I talked about the self-assessment and how we hope that that sort of embeds continuous improvement. And in this case, you can see that the center perceived that they did a bit better than they were actually scored by the monitor. And so what we would hope is that this would provoke a conversation maybe between the project director and the site coordinator to see what it is, where did they miss out? What did they think they had that they didn't quite get? And so that's, again, where the self-assessment score comes back around and they get to see how they thought they did. This next slide is an excerpt from a grantee level report. And again, you can see that we really try to provide some introductory stuff. We remind them how the centers were selected and really try to contextualize all of the data for them so that they can, we try to do some of that interpretation and help them out and point them in the right direction. So you'll see that right here, for example, this project director completed this submission, and it was QIs 37 and 38B. And you can see this grantee did really well. In fact, the monitor score and the self-assessment score are the same. So this project director knew that he or she did a good job, and the monitor concurred and confirmed that they did do, they got an optimizing score on both of these QIs. And then that data is also presented at the bottom as well. The other thing, this is also still at the grantee level. We provide a completion data table, and I meant to, these are, the gray out is because these are actually excerpts from real reports, and we wanted to redact the names of the centers. So that's what that blob is. Normally there would be names of centers there for the project director to see. So the project director could look at this, see which QIs were measured during this window, and then a list of their center names, and see that they all submitted. And the asterisks indicate that they did submit. And so this project director is probably really happy with his or her centers because they all had 100% completion rate in the process. We also use heat maps to make a visual interpretation of the data easier. If you remember on the continuum, and Shelley alluded to how the top 3, 2, 3s, and 4s, implementing, progressing, and optimizing are different shades of green. So green is good, and we use heat maps to show this. The lightest green on the heat map indicates 2 are implementing, and then going across to the darkest being a 4 are optimizing. So when I look at this, some things that I might notice just to kind of help you see the ways that these data can be interpreted and used. Most of the centers here are where TEA wanted them to be, which was at implementing. In fact, a couple of the centers are above a 2 in several areas, which that indicates areas of strength. We set really rigorous expectations. So we really don't expect or want everyone to get a 4. If we ceilinged out at a 4, then we would have to question how we're measuring or what we're measuring. So as much as PDs would really like this to happen, it's not the expectation that everyone gets straight 4s. Looking again at it, I see one elementary school seems to be struggling a bit on QI9, and we hope that this would signify to the project director that maybe that center or that site coordinator could use some extra support on that QI. And also it could be something that Westat would look at and think that maybe some training around that, that quality indicator would be helpful. So because each QI uniquely measures something that matters, we don't average, we don't provide an aggregate like single distilled number for the QIs. They don't get a single, like, here's your average QI, because what we are seeking to do is provide sort of a profile of program quality, looking at several different indicators. It is not only entirely possible, but likely that centers are very strong in some areas and then they struggle or have opportunities for improvement in other areas. And we want our instrument and our reporting to reflect that kind of nuanced variation. So this is just another way that we provide data. This is looking at center level QAP scores, QIs 3, 8, and 9. And these are 4 different centers. So this way, a project director could look at this and very quickly see that, oh, okay, so the center that's the center that has the red bar is struggling in QI9, and it just gives them a quick visual to be able to interpret the data. I'm going to kind of hurry up here so we have time for questions. The red doesn't mean anything on this slide. This is just multiple QIs for a single center. So this would be looking at center X. That center really struggled on QI 14 and seemed pretty strong in everything else. These are the higher level data. This is sort of state level data. And this is looking across all the programs that participated in the QAP. And in this one, we can see where all 239 centers landed on a single QI, in this case, QI9. And so the leaders at TEA could look at this and say, and see that while a lot are right at the optimizing, there are still enough centers at other levels that we might want to think about how to better support those centers. Because the continuum is operationalized for our measure, we can unpack these data and really understand exactly why they stopped at any particular level on the continuum. And then finally, here's the same data presented as a pie graph. So we really try to give them the data in every which way that we can to help them make sense of it and be able to use it, because we're often data rich and action poor. So we really want what we provide to be meaningful and useful to them. So I'm going to pass back off to Caryn, who's going to wrap it up, and then we can open up for questions. Oh,
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, we wanted to save a little time at the end. If you have any questions, we can also include our email addresses in the chat in case you'd want to reach out to us at a later time, if there's any other information that we could provide that you might consider helpful. I guess if you have a question, either you could put it in the chat or just unmute yourself. Either way would be great.
Someone asked Caryn if the slides are going to be available.
Yes, I wasn't sure. Yes, we're happy to share the PowerPoint. I just wasn't sure what the process was for sharing that information, but we can give that to Paula, and I hope she can disseminate that for you.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put a link to it on the information page where the recording will be housed also.
Okay.
So, if anyone wants to access the slides, they can find them there.
Great, thank you. Any other questions that we could answer?
Well, I just wanted to thank you all. This has been really, really great. Lots of information to unpack. We appreciate your time, Caryn and Lisa and Shelley, for presenting with us. And we are so glad that you were able to join us after that terrible freak storm that, you know, ended up being trouble for a lot of people, attendees and presenters. So it's, we were so thrilled that the conference's the theme was resilience, because all of our Texas people really were going through it at the time that the conference was happening. So thank you all for attending today. Take time out of your busy schedules to join us, and we hope you will come back again next week for another in our series of Beyond School Hours follow-up webinars. Our webinars are open to anyone, so please feel free to share the links with your colleagues. This is something that we're going to be doing every week up through December. So please join us, and it's an opportunity for some free professional learning. We also want you to keep your eyes out for registration for the Beyond School Hours Conference. We will be back in Orlando in 2022, February 23rd through the 26th. And I'll just share my screen, show you our little save the date. So we're so excited to have an opportunity to be back together again. Take advantage of early bird registration, take advantage of the fact that the tickets to fly to Florida right now are the cheapest that they're going to be for a long time. And again, we appreciate your time, and Paula will make sure that there's a link to the presentation along with the recording, and join us again next week. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.